I'll begin with talking about the Nelson family, consisting of Axel, actually it was Carl Axel Nelson, and his wife Mabel Nelson. Mabel's maiden name was Johnson. She was born in Chicago, Illinois. Axel was born in Sweden. I remember the year he was born, which was 1889. It was April 4th, I believe, was his birth date. They had 4 children. Esther, who was the oldest, Winnie, next, Vernon, and then Carl Gerald, or Jerry as he was known all his life. Axel came to the United States from Sweden when he was 16 years old, returned once to Sweden after he'd been in the United States approximately 3 years. He used to tell many stories about Sweden, fond recollection of Sweden. Told such stories as when the king would come to the summer home, would line the roads holding candles, wait for several hours for the king to come by in his carriage. Told stories about his father. One of his favorite stories to tell about his father was his father got bit by one of the horses, bled profusely from the arm. He got bit in the arm. Time that he came from Sweden was a time when many people were coming to this country. Like I said, at the age of 16, he went down to the local train station in Sweden, asked the ticket man for a ticket to the United States of America. Man asked where he'd like to go. He said he did not know. So the gentleman at the train station, for some reason, I guess the reason that he selected Sheridan, Illinois to send Axel to was because there were some other folks from that same general area that had gone to Sheridan previously. He tells about the trip to this country. They took a boat from Sweden to England, traveled in probably what would be, I suppose in today's world would be called third-class accommodations, or obviously the various cheapest accommodations available. Laid over in England for a couple of days, and back on another ship and to this country, trained right across the continent, eventually coming to Sheridan. Upon reaching Sheridan, Illinois, what do? So got off the train, had his bag, put his bag under the depot bench, asked the man if it would be all right. Fortunately, found some people who could speak Swedish and just started to walk. A man picked him up, farmer, asked him where he was going. He said he didn't know. The man said, well, you can come and work for me for your room and board, which was agreeable. He went back to the train station, picked the suitcase up, and so as starters in this country, he worked for this farmer for the room and board. About a year of this, during which time the man began paying him some salary as well as room and board. He decided that he would go to Ottawa and become a cabinet maker. Always claimed that this is probably one of the mistakes he made, and that the farmer was willing to give him some land and allow him to pay it off, as he would have ended up being a landowner in the Sheridan, Illinois area, which, as we all know now, is a rather wealthy farming area. Axel then proceeded to become a craftsman in the piano factories in the Ottawa area. I have in my possession some artifacts from Sweden, one of which is a snuff box, which was my grandfather's snuff box. Per Nelson is inscribed on it. Another one is a pipe that was given to my grandfather by the founder of the Nobel Prize, Mr. Nobel, who gave this pipe to the man that my grandfather worked for, who in turn gave it to my grandfather. I get a little confused with the geography in Sweden, but basically it's Värmland, which I believe is the same as one of our states. That would be like the state of Illinois, Värmland. in Sweden. Grums is a town. Norrköping is another town. It was in this general area that the Nelson family lived in Sweden. My father came to this country, originally came, he used the name of Persson, because in the Scandinavian tradition, you took your father's first name, and his father's first name was Per, and it added son to it, and that became your name, Persson. He used that for the first 3 years that he was in this country. However, when he returned the second time, he then commenced using the name of Nelson. Used that ever since. Turning now some to Axel's wife, Mabel. Her maiden name was Johnson. She was born in Chicago, Illinois, and lived there. They were married, and then they moved to Ottawa. How they met, I don't exactly know. Mabel's father was Charles Johnson. Her mother's name was Tilda Johnson. Charles Johnson was a pattern maker in the brick factories. Worked in a Chicago Retort was the name of the company. Brickton, as was known in Ottawa. Worked for many years for this company in Ottawa, Illinois. He was a very religious man, would not tolerate smoking nor drinking. Conceded that it was okay for my father to chew snuff, but that was about as far as he would go with those types of considerations. In later years, he became very crippled, probably with arthritis, walked with 2 canes. So I would remember him, he would spend most of the day sitting in his chair, reading the Bible. Was rather stern sort of person, stubborn. Drove Model T Fords, a Model T Ford. Someone would pass him on the highway to block him from going around. He's known to race trains to the crossing, this type of thing. Mabel worked as a hat maker in the Chicago area. She had several brothers and sisters, all of whom was Phil, who probably one of the younger ones, Art, Catherine, Bernice, Alice, Adeline, Esther, some of the people that were on Mabel's side of the family. Returning now to Axel's family again, he had brother Hugo, who was gassed during the First World War, lived out in Colorado all of his life. Didn't work. He was discharged from the Army. He's on full pension. Reclusive type of guy who loved to hunt and fish in the mountains. Had a sister, Jenny, who is currently living in Sweden. She came to this country on several occasions, worked as a domestic. She worked for a man on Wall Street, worked in Miami, old maid. Apparently has saved sums of money. She absconded with the family's funds when Axel's mother died during World War II. Jenny, of course, people were unable to get back and forth to Europe, so Jenny ended up with all of the family funds. She had a sister, Anna, who lived out in New Jersey. Married a gentleman by the name of Martin Parks. They lived on a resort. He served as the groundskeeper. It wasn't a resort, it was an estate, I should say. He was a groundskeeper on the estate. Anna also worked as a domestic. He had one younger brother, Pete, who died at an early age in Chicago. He tells a story of first time he went back to Sweden. Little Pete was a young boy running around at the time, and he would run out in the fields. At the age of approximately 3, his mother would stop plowing and would proceed to breastfeed the boy at that age. After working in the piano factories in the early 30s and in the Depression time, while the piano factories closed up, my dad then went to Elgin, worked for a while, and still for the same gentleman that owned the piano factory in Ottawa. E.P. Johnson was his name. He worked making kitchen furniture and bars and this type of thing. He also worked at the Ambassador East as a repairman, worked for St. Charles Kitchens. While working for the Johnson factory in Elgin, installing bars, he worked in Cicero, he worked at the Silver Slipper, worked for Al Capone, made a bar there. Tells about going to St. Louis, installing hairdressing, beauty parlor type of arrangement. Tells a story of how the man that owned that operation had a chauffeur and limousine drive him around St. Louis to show him the whole city. After these years, he then went to work for Leader Furniture Company in Ottawa, where he remained until he retired several years back. Axel has now passed away. He died at the age of 92. Spent his last days in the Pleasant View Lutheran Home in Ottawa. Some of his joys in life were the dog Colonel, he called him. He belonged to Company E during the war. National Guard, did not go away, was always at home. He was First World War. He had a couple of children, so didn't get involved in that. And of course, by the Second World War, he was